Hello. Today I'm going to take you to a place where fear comes to life and the unknown becomes reality. Prepare yourself, because what you're about to hear are not just stories, but terrifying accounts that defy logic and test the limits of sanity. Here, where the darkness is denser and the silence hides dark secrets, every word could be the prelude to an endless nightmare. Buckle up and keep the lights on, because this journey into terror is just beginning. Hello, my name is Roberto, and I've been working as a gravedigger for over 2 decades. You might think that such a job is straightforward, but let me tell you, the nights here can be far from ordinary. The darkness of the cemetery holds secrets that most people wouldn't believe, even if they saw them with their own eyes. It was a chilly autumn evening when the unsettling events began. The sky was overcast, and a heavy mist clung to the ground, making the graveyard look like a ghostly shroud. I was assigned to dig a new grave for a burial scheduled the next morning. The wind howled through the trees, and the only light came from the dim beam of my flashlight. As I started digging, the earth felt strangely resistant, as if something beneath was pushing back. I thought it was just the hard ground or my fatigue, but the feeling grew more intense as I continued. Each shovel of dirt seemed to be met with an unnatural force. The sensation was so eerie that I almost gave up, but a gnawing curiosity pushed me forward. I was determined to finish the job, despite the growing unease. After several hours of relentless digging, I struck something solid. My heart raced as I carefully cleared away the surrounding dirt to reveal a worn wooden coffin. It was unlike any other I had encountered. Its wood was old and splintered, and it had an unusual, ornate design. I took a deep breath and decided to open it, despite a shiver running down my spine. The coffin creaked open, and I was met with a sight that defied explanation. Instead of a body, there was an old mirror inside, its surface covered in a thick layer of dust. My curiosity got the better of me, and I wiped the dust away. What I saw in the mirror made my blood run cold. The reflection showed me, but not as I was at that moment. It was as if the mirror was showing a distorted vision of the future. Me, with a look of pure terror etched on my face, my eyes wide and pleading. Suddenly, a bone-chilling breeze swept through the cemetery, and I felt an icy presence behind me. I spun around, my flashlight trembling in my hand. There, in the dim light, was a shadowy figure emerging from between the tombstones. Its form was vague and shifting, but its presence was unmistakably malevolent. I could feel its eyes boring into me, and a sense of dread overwhelmed me. Desperate to escape, I backed away from the grave, my breaths coming in ragged gasps. The shadow seemed to follow my every movement, gliding silently behind me. I stumbled over a headstone and fell, the shadow closing in. The cold around me became unbearable, and I could hear a whispering voice, barely audible, but filled with anguish and rage. In a panic, I scrambled to my feet and fled towards the cemetery gate. The shadow seemed to grow fainter as I ran, but the feeling of being watched persisted. When I finally reached the gate, I turned around to see the shadow dissipate into the mist, leaving only the eerie silence of the cemetery. I returned to my work the next day, but the experience had left me deeply unsettled. Every time I passed that grave, I could feel the oppressive weight of the mirror's gaze. I began to hear faint whispers at night, and the feeling of being followed never entirely left me. The mirror was removed, but I can't shake the feeling that whatever was trapped in that reflection is still out there, waiting for the next unwary soul to uncover its dark secret. Hello, my name is Louise, and I've been a grave digger for many years. Most people think it's a quiet, uneventful job, but those who work in cemeteries know that the real horror isn't always the dead, but the things that stir in the dark. It was an unusually cold night in November when I was assigned a task that would haunt me forever. The cemetery was eerily quiet, the only sound being the crunch of fallen leaves underfoot and the occasional gust of wind rustling through the trees. I had to stand guard over a freshly dug grave for a new burial scheduled for the following day. We had received a tip that someone might attempt to desecrate the site, so I was tasked with keeping watch. The night dragged on slowly, the chill seeping into my bones. I sat on a wooden bench near the grave, clutching a flashlight and trying to focus on a book to pass the time. The air was thick with tension, and my mind kept wandering to old stories about restless spirits and forbidden rituals. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Around midnight, the tranquility was shattered by an unsettling noise, a muffled, rhythmic thumping that seemed to come from beneath the ground. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I shone my flashlight on the grave, and to my horror, I saw the earth begin to shift. It was as if something or someone was trying to claw its way out. I approached the grave cautiously, every step feeling like it took an eternity. The thumping grew louder, more desperate. I was terrified, but I had to see what was happening. As I neared the edge of the grave, I saw a dark, skeletal hand emerging from the dirt. My blood ran cold as I realized that whatever was coming out was not just a body, but something far more sinister. Panicking, I stumbled backward and almost fell into the hole. I fumbled for my radio to call for help, but no signal was coming through. The hand was followed by an arm, then a whole figure, emaciated and covered in grime, with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. The figure clambered out of the grave with a sickening sound of scraping against the sides. It was a ghastly sight, and I could see now that it wore tattered clothes, as if it had been buried alive. Its eyes were wide, filled with a torment that defied description. The figure looked directly at me, its expression one of pain and fury. I stumbled back, my flashlight flickering as the figure began to move toward me. I could feel an icy chill in the air, the temperature dropping rapidly. The whispers started then, a cacophony of voices speaking in hushed, frantic tones. The figure's mouth moved, but no coherent words came out, only an eerie, guttural sound that sent shivers down my spine. I ran, my breath coming in ragged gasps, but the figure seemed to follow me effortlessly. I darted between tombstones, my mind racing with fear. Every time I glanced back, the figure was still there, getting closer. I reached the cemetery gate, but the latch was stuck. I pulled and tugged, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Just as the figure was about to reach me, I managed to wrench the gate open and fled into the night. I didn't stop running until I reached the nearest police station. My clothes were covered in dirt, and I could barely speak, only managing to stammer about the grave and the figure. The police came with me to the cemetery, but when we arrived, everything was as it should be. The grave was intact, and there was no sign of the figure. They thought I might have been imagining things due to the stress and the cold, but I know what I saw. I know the feeling of those hollow eyes on me and the chill of that spectral presence. I still work at the cemetery, but every time I pass that grave, I feel an icy dread. The whispers and shadows seem to follow me, and I can't shake the feeling that whatever I encountered that night is still out there, waiting for the next person to disturb its restless slumber. Hello, my name is Marcos, and I work as a gravedigger at a small secluded cemetery. Most people think our work is simple and mundane, but there are nights when the cemetery takes on a life of its own, revealing things that are far from ordinary. It was a night bathed in moonlight, with a silvery glow casting long shadows over the gravestones. The cemetery had been eerily quiet all evening, the only sound being the occasional rustle of leaves stirred by a restless wind. I had been assigned to prepare a grave for a burial scheduled the next morning. It was a routine job, or so I thought. As I dug, the cool night air began to grow colder, and a thick fog started to roll in, swirling around the tombstones like an ethereal curtain. The moonlight created ghostly patterns on the ground, and I felt a creeping unease settle over me. My flashlight cast flickering shadows, adding to the unsettling atmosphere. Around midnight, I heard a faint sound, a low, mournful sobbing coming from somewhere nearby. I paused my work, straining to locate the source of the sound. It was coming from an old, overgrown section of the cemetery that had long been abandoned. I had never ventured into that area before, but curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed my flashlight and made my way through the fog and the tangled underbrush. The sobbing grew louder as I approached, but it was accompanied by an odd scraping noise. The sound was both familiar and horrifying, like nails dragging against a chalkboard. When I finally reached the source of the noise, I was confronted with a sight that made my blood run cold. There, partially obscured by the fog and shadows, was an ancient, weathered tombstone. The inscription was barely legible, but it appeared to be the grave of someone who had died over a century ago. Next to the tombstone was a small, dilapidated mausoleum with a rusty iron door that had been ajar for years. The sobbing was now accompanied by a faint, rhythmic thumping, as if someone, or something, was trying to break free from inside the mausoleum. The noises were growing more frantic, and I could feel an icy chill creeping up my spine. I hesitated, but felt compelled to investigate. With trembling hands, I pushed the iron door open, and it creaked ominously. The inside was dark and musty, filled with stale air and the scent of decay. My flashlight revealed a small stone sarcophagus at the center of the chamber. The thumping was louder now, coming from within the sarcophagus. I took a deep breath and opened the sarcophagus, my flashlight casting long, quivering beams across the interior. The lid shifted with an agonizing groan, revealing a sight that nearly made me collapse. Inside was a figure, barely more than a skeleton, wrapped in tattered remnants of burial shrouds. But the figure's eyes were open, and they glowed with an unnatural, malevolent light. The figure's skeletal hand shot out of the sarcophagus, gripping the edge of the stone with a force that seemed to defy its emaciated state. The eyes, though hollow, seemed to pierce through me, filled with an intense, unending anguish. The sobbing was now a wail of despair, reverberating off the walls of the mausoleum. In sheer terror, I stumbled backward, nearly falling into the darkness. The wailing grew louder, and the mausoleum seemed to close in around me. The temperature plummeted, and a bone-chilling wind whipped through the chamber, carrying with it a whispering voice that repeated one phrase over and over: "Help me. Release me." Desperate to escape, I turned and fled from the mausoleum, stumbling through the fog and the underbrush. The sounds of the wailing and thumping followed me, growing fainter but never entirely disappearing. I ran until I reached the cemetery gate, nearly collapsing as I fumbled to unlock it and get outside. When I finally made it to safety, I looked back to see the mausoleum shrouded in thick fog, the oppressive presence seemingly receding. I tried to explain what I had seen to my colleagues, but they dismissed it as a figment of my imagination, influenced by the eerie atmosphere of the night. But I know what I saw. The experience left a deep mark on me. Every time I pass that part of the cemetery, I feel the same icy dread, as if the wailing and the desperate eyes are still reaching out from the darkness. The mausoleum remains locked, but I can't shake the feeling that whatever was trapped inside is still searching for release, and that one day it might come looking for me. If you've made it this far, it means you've faced the horrors lurking in the shadows. But remember, the stories you've heard today are more than just simple tales. They are warnings that the unknown might be closer than we think. Before you go, Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new spine-chilling story. Share this video with anyone you think can handle the fear. And remember, not everyone who rests in peace stays there. Until next time, if you dare to return.